What's up guys, Rhett Tollison, KST Customs. Today we're going to be going over installation on a 2019 Road King Standard. We're going to be putting 14-inch spearheads on there. From 2014 to 2020 on the Road King Standards, Road King Specials, Road King CVOs. If you have hydraulic brake and clutch, you can go up to a 14-inch bar at stock length. All that needs to be extended is the electrical. If you have a cable clutch on any of those year models, the highest you can go is a 12 at stock length. On 2021 and 2022 models, you can go up to 12 inches at stock length. If you want to go to 14s, all that needs to be extended is the clutch, which we offer a product from Fat Baggers. It's a clutch extension. We'll get into that a little bit later on. So we're going to get started with the teardown. Then we'll go to the internal wiring, and then we'll reassemble the bike. I've got a couple other products that we'll go over along the way. But once again, this is a 2019 model. Same rules will apply 2014 to 2020. All right, so the first thing we're going to do, like always, is cover up our tins, gas tank, fender, just so that they're protected. You know, nothing falls on them, scratches them up, dings them. So we've got a tank cover, fender cover. We'll get those on before we start disassembling anything. Tank cover. We've also got our bag covers that we'll use to put our brake and clutch assemblies in. You know, doesn't have to necessarily be a bag specific to this. You can use anything. You can put a towel over the gas tank, towel over the fender, you know, just something to protect it in case something were to fall on it. All right, so the first place we're going to start is right here where your fork locking mechanism is. This guy's got a little timepiece, but it at the stock position, or the way it comes from the factory, there'll be a little plastic cap there that says lock, unlock. You'll pry that open, pry that up with a little flathead screwdriver. It'll pop right off. You got two Phillips head bolts right there. We'll remove those, then we'll come around to the headlight. There's several screws there. Remove the headlight, and that'll give us access to all of our switch plugs. All right, so this is where factory, you'll have a little lock, unlock, plastic piece, flathead screwdriver will pop it up. Like I said, this guy's got a fancy little timepiece. We're going to spin it out of the way. Two Phillips head bolts. Come right off. All right, on the front end, there's a couple different ways to do this. We try to do it in a way where we take the least amount of stuff off as possible. You can completely take this whole shroud off. All we're going to do though is just remove this bezel around the headlight, remove the headlight completely, and then we'll be able to get in there and unplug everything. But you can remove the acorn bolts on the side and take the whole shroud off if you want to. It's not necessary. You're able to get enough access in there by just taking the headlight out. All right, so it's another Phillips head bolt for this headlight bezel. Take it out, and this whole bezel will pop off. All right, now there's several Phillips head bolts that hold the headlight in. We're going to remove those. Headlight will come out, have a high beam, low beam plug. We'll disconnect those and put our headlight to the side. Headlight will come out. This is an aftermarket headlight, so it's just got a single plug. If it's a stock headlight, you'll notice there's a high beam, low beam. So we're just going to disconnect this single plug here. And we'll put our headlight to the side. All right, so we've got a little trim piece here. It's got a 5/16 nut underneath that holds it. Take it off. All right, trim piece will come off. Just put it to the side. All right, we've got our last Phillips head bolt here that holds this nacelle on that goes over the riser clamp. There's a nut underneath it. It's a little tricky, but you need to put your finger on it. The way you can hold it. You might be able to get a pair of pliers on it. It's not the most user-friendly area. All right, so you have a bolt, a washer, and a nut. All right, now we're going to take our brake and clutch lever assemblies off. We've got our protective bags. We'll drop them in. These are Torx 25. This guy has some aftermarket accessories, but your stock bolts will be a Torx 25 or Torx 27. So we'll take those off, put our levers in our bags, go on to the next step. All right, one thing I want to point out, the only major difference on a Road King standard versus a Road King Special and CVO is on the Specials and CVOs, the blinkers are mounted to the brake and clutch lever assemblies. So when you remove your perch clamp, you'll notice that there is a wire going into the switch housing that is for your blinker. So once you were on the Specials and CVOs, once you remove the perch clamp, you'll also have to disassemble the switch covers so that you can disconnect that plug for your blinker. It's kind of a two-man job because you got a lot of pieces right there. They're just kind of all hanging together. So if you've got a helping hand that can help you out for a second, I would suggest it. All right, so now we're going to disconnect our switch harnesses, our throttle by wire. I'll also show you where on the Road King Specials and CVO where the blinker plug will be located. So we're going to disconnect those, pull them out through this area at the riser clamp, and then we'll be ready to completely remove the bars from the bike. All right, so on the rider's left side of the neck, you're going to have the switch harness plug for the left side and the throttle by wire plug as well. Also, if you can see here, these two wires on the Special and the CVO, that'll be the blinkers that you have to unplug because they have to run through the handlebar. On the standard, we're going to leave them put because the blinkers are down here at the forks. But we'll get these disconnected and do the same thing for the rider's right side as well. You'll have one zip tie here on the throttle by wire harness you need to snip. Freeze that up. We'll get the other side. We'll get our right side harness unplugged. All right, another thing we're going to do while we're down here, there's a zip tie that holds the brake and clutch lines together. We're going to snip that. And then also, there's this hydraulic hose tray that seats your hydraulic lines to the neck. We're going to remove our hoses from that tray to give us a couple extra inches that we need for our 14s. All right, now we're going to snake our switch harnesses through this shroud. Just be careful, make sure you don't pull a plug off or anything. There's a lot of different stuff in there they can get caught on. Get the throttle by wire. All right, now we're free to remove our bars from the bike. Now we're going to remove our riser bolts. These are 1/4 inch hex drive. It's another scenario where it may be beneficial to have a helping hand. If you're by yourself, just kind of hold the bars up with your hip while you take the bolts out. All right, last thing we're going to do on the bike to give us a little bit extra length, there are zip ties around the riser post that hold your hydraulic lines to it. We're going to bust them loose. Got one on each riser post. Some of them you can get a pair of snips on there and cut them. Yeah, if it's super tight, I just grab them with a set of needle nose and just twist until they break. All right, now we're ready to start the internal wiring process. We'll get our harnesses removed from our bar, take our switch covers apart, grips off. The throttle by wire on this Road King standard, you have to thread it out of the bar. Your Special and your CVO, everything is run internally, so you have to pull everything out of the bar. But for the standard, it's got external wiring on the switch harnesses, so that'll just come right off. I'm also going to go over some grips that we sell. They're Avon grips. I've got a set of air cushions here with me today. And the only other thing needed for the install is our wire extensions. They're just plug and play, $35. They're easy to use and they work really good. All right, so we're going to start with our clutch side first. You'll notice a button here on the back of the switch housing. That's your odometer button. There's not a real pretty way to tell you how to get it off other than it'll pop up a little bit and then you're gonna push it out towards the end of the grip. I use both thumbs, just kind of do equal pressure. It will feel like you're gonna break it. Of all the thousands that we've done, we broke 2 in 7 years. So just give it a little pressure and it'll pop right off. All right. Now we've got our 2 T25 bolts that will back out. Switch covers will come apart. Put our switch covers to the side. There's a little tab here right beside the plug. You'll have to put some leverage on, pop it up, and it'll open up the back side of the switch housing. And then it'll come right off the bar. Stock grips. If you're planning on reusing these, sometimes the glue's already loose, but if it's held on there pretty tight, get you a flathead screwdriver, try to pry, some of it loose. If you've got an air compressor, you can peel it back enough to shoot some air in there while you're twisting. It'll break free. But we'll go to the throttle side and get it removed now. All right, same thing over here, T25 bolts. Same thing here, a little tab, it's your flathead, leverage up on it, move the housing from the bar. Now the throttle grip will just slide right off. You'll notice you got your throttle sensor here. We're gonna pull the harness out of the bar now so that we can load it in our new bar. All right, we're gonna take our throttle sensor out, just get it free from the notches, and just kind of pull it through. Just be careful on the end of it. The plug doesn't get caught on that slot. All right, we're ready to load them in our new bar now. All right, so now we're ready to start loading our harnesses into our new bar. A couple things I want to go over. If you have a Road King standard, the stock riser is a 1-inch diameter. So you'll need a 1-inch, we're doing our 14-inch Spearheads. You'll need a 1-inch base clamp for the standard. If it's a Special or a CVO, you'll need an 1 1/4 diameter base clamp that comes with an 1 1/4 riser. You'll notice here that the 1-inch clamps are slightly narrower. This is just to eliminate some part numbers. This base clamp will also work on Softails, Dynas, Sportsters. So we've narrowed it up a little bit just so it fits the front ends a little bit better. It is 11 inches wide outside to outside. The 1 1/4 one is 13 inches wide outside to outside. So what we're going to be using today for the standard is the 1-inch. We'll get our uprights driven into the knuckles, and then we'll start throwing some wires in there. All right, so when you get your bars, they're going to be wrapped in foam. Our quality inspection, before we ship things out is really, really tight. That's not to say that parts can't be damaged in shipping. So if you want to unwrap the bars completely, you can, but I would highly suggest wrapping them back up. All we like to take off, when we're wiring them up, is just remove enough foam to where you can get to this slot here. And then on the bottom, just remove enough so that we can drive it down into the base clamp, primarily just expose the reduced area. So we'll do that for both of them, and then we'll go over driving them into the base. All right, so on our road glides, you'll notice that there's an offset here. On the road glides, that offset always has to be towards the front end of the bike. On the Road Kings, since there's no big gauge cluster that comes down on your base, this can be mounted with the offset either to the rider or away from the rider. If you are a short arm guy or lady and you're trying to get the bars as close to you as you can and they still look somewhat functional, I would suggest putting that offset towards you. That's just going to put the bars an extra inch towards the rider, 1.5 inches towards the rider. If that's not really important to you, or if it doesn't really matter, you can put that offset to the front. But that's just another option of flexibility there. If you're trying to get the bars closer to you, just put that offset towards the rider. All right, so for this install, we're going to put the offset away from the rider. Just make sure that your KST Customs logo badge is right side up. You can have it where it's upside down. So just pay attention to that, make sure that it's oriented correctly. So we're going to put our throttle side in here. All right, we're going to flip it upside down because the way we manufacture these, it's a really tight fit. So we like to use a rubber mallet, hold the upright, and just drive the bottom side of the base clamp so that it seats all the way down in there. So we got it in there, we're just going to drive it flush. So you just want the bottom portion of that to be relatively flush with the bottom of the base clamp. All right, we'll do the non-throttle side next. I like to rest the side you just did on the table a little bit so it doesn't back out. Just make sure that the point or the top surface of your handlebar is not touching the table, otherwise it could scratch it up a little bit. Just rest the end of the handle there on it. Both of them are flush there. All right, now that we got the bar assembled, just double check, make sure you got your orientation correct. You got your throttle side, will be on the correct side once the bars are put on the bike. So with our Vanguard collection, that'll be our Spearhead, Pioneer, Pathfinder. We'll always send this green mesh sleeving in the package. It's what we like to use to pull the wiring harnesses through. You can thread this in by hand as well. We're going to go in through the handle slot, push it out the bottom, and then we'll hook up our harnesses and pull them through. All right, we're going to thread our mesh sleeving into the handle slot, push it through the bottom. All right, now we're going to hook up our plugs inside of this mesh sleeving. Just want to get them in there just enough, kind of cinch it tight, where when you pull with pressure on the bottom side that they don't come loose. Just kind of push and pull. Once you get them over that hump, they'll go through there easy. Seat your switch housing onto the bar, shut the back door. All right, now we're gonna get our plugs out of the mesh sleeving. All right, you're gonna have to thread it back through one more time for the throttle by wire harness. Now for this, we'll just go through the end of the handle. Just get enough out of the bottom. Put our plugs inside. One thing you'll notice on the throttle by wire harness, there's a plug for heated grips. So if you don't have heated grips, that plug will not be used for anything. Same thing, kind of thread them through. Push, pull out the slack. If you feel like it's getting hung up, back it out a little bit, twist it, restart. That mesh, the black wire loom on here, it's pretty thick and bulky, so you may feel it getting caught in this joint. All right, you want to seat your sensor into the end of the grip, or the end of the handle, sorry. All right, now we're going to unhook our plugs from the mesh sleeving. All right, we'll be ready to do the other side now. Same thing for the clutch side. I'm gonna thread our mesh sleeving into the upright. We'll hook up our plug inside of it. One thing I'll say too, doing it on the table like this with the bar, just lay it on the table, just be careful that the bar is not rubbing back and forth a lot. If you see us at a rally doing it, we'll do it in our lap. It's just the way that we've gotten accustomed to doing it. Just feed the harness in, pull out the slack. Once you get it over the hump there, it'll get really, really easy. We'll seat our housing onto the tube, close the door on the back, and disconnect the plug from the sleeving. All right, you're going to be done with your mesh sleeving now. If you are doing a one-piece solid bar, we do not send this mesh sleeving. It just doesn't work as good in the one-piece bars, having to go through two different joints. It's just not as beneficial as what we typically use. All right, now we're going to put our grips on, put our switch covers back on. Here we're using Avon air cushion grips. We've got these in black and chrome. They're really comfortable. They're probably our second most popular seller behind the Avon memory foam. But it's a good grip. It's backed by a limited lifetime warranty. For some reason the rubber wears out. You can get in touch with Avon, send them back, and they'll provide you a new set. All right, so for the throttle side, just going to slide the grip on. Make sure that your electrical harness is not in a bind or crimped bad. It should be seated good inside of the housing. So before you put the covers on, just take a quick glance at that and make sure everything looks good. Our covers on. Get our T25 bolts, run them in. Don't put them super tight because we will probably do some final adjusting. Just kind of butt them up. All right, same thing on the clutch side. The Avon grips, they're keyed. They're not glued on. They'll kind of lock into the switch housing. So you'll slide them on. There's also a catch point in the end of this grip. So when you put it on there and you feel it stop, you have to press it in just a little bit farther. Butt it up to the switch housing until the key sits in there properly. Once again, double check your wiring harness. Make sure it's not crimped or in a bind before you put your switch covers on. T25 bolts, butt them up. Make sure they move freely. All right, last thing, we'll put our odometer button on. Same thing, it just kind of slides on there and you'll hear it kind of click. All right, now we're gonna plug in our wire extensions for our switch harnesses. The throttle by wire does not need extended. You can go up to 16 inches, no problems there. But we use our CAN bus wire extensions. We've got one for the left side, one for the right side. These come in a set when you buy them. You're not buying, separate pieces here. So we'll plug those up and then we'll be ready to put our bars on the bike. All right, just make sure that these click in properly. All right, we're good to go. All right, so we're ready to mount our bars on the bike. One thing with the hydraulic lines, the brake and clutch lines, what we like to do is go ahead and put the bars in the riser, just kind of lay them down. You want to make sure that your brake and clutch lines are on the top side or the front side of the base clamp. It'll just allow everything to mount up a little bit cleaner. So before you put the bars in here, it's maybe another scenario where you need a helping hand. Just make sure that the hydraulic lines are on the front side of the base, and then you'll be ready to put your top riser. All right, one accessory that we've started carrying under our brand, it's our Crazy Clamp. This is an upgraded top riser piece. It's made out of billet aluminum. It's all machined, and there's 3 set screws. It just gives you an added layer of protection as far as security with the bars being mounted in the riser. So you'll tighten those down and then you can go in and tighten up your set screws, so it just gives it something to bite into. It's not a necessity item, but it just, for 80 bucks, a little bit extra peace of mind, it's a good product to have. All right, so before we put our top riser clamp on, we're gonna go ahead and run our wiring harnesses through the shroud so that they'll be ready to plug up. It's just, you got a little bit more room to play with doing it now rather than when the bars are upright. All right, we're just gonna kind of snake them through here, one at a time. You may have to move your hydraulic lines around a little bit and get them out of your way. Just kind of get them, you know, started, pointing in the right direction, then you can reach your hand through the headlight and pull them through. All right, now we're ready to put our top riser on. All right, take a quick peek at your knurls on the base clamp. Just make sure that they're symmetric in the riser. You don't want to mount everything up and they be slid all the way over to one side. So just check for symmetry there. Stand your bars upright. Once again, it's another spot where helping hand may be beneficial. Just kind of get the bolts started. And then just butt them up. And before you tighten up your set screws in that crazy clamp, make sure you like the position of the bars, because once you tighten those up, they're not going to go anywhere. All right, now we're ready to unwrap our uprights and mount our brake and clutch lever assemblies. I do not recommend using a knife for this. We see it all the time. Guys try to use a knife to cut the tape and they scratch the crap out of their bar. All right, we're going to put our brake lever assembly on. Just make sure it seats into the switch housing properly. There's little teeth on the back side of it that it'll nest into. Same thing we've been doing, just kind of butt it up. Don't over tighten it, because we'll probably have to adjust them for our final fitment. All right, same thing on the other side. Get our clutch on here. Same thing with it. There's a little teeth or a little groove, whatever you want to call it, that the clutch assembly will nest into. All right, one thing I want to go over, because we have a lot of calls about it. If you have a little bit of play in your throttle here, that's okay. The gears inside of the grip, you know, they're pretty deep. So as long as that, you know, throttle is engaging when you twist it, it will not cause a problem. We don't make our handles where everything just bottoms out and there's no play at all, because there's a chance that your throttle could stick, you know, if there's no you know, ability to move in there. So if you feel that, that's why. A lot of people say, well, my stock bars didn't have that. If it was a 1-inch bar, which comes on the Road King standards, you won't feel it, because you can slide everything up until there's just barely enough, you know, play, and it's safe. But on ours, with it being a welded joint here, we give it a little bit extra tolerance, just so that there is a little bit of travel in that throttle grip, so that there's no chance that that grip can stick on you. All right, so we're pretty close to wrapping things up. We're going to get our switch harnesses plugged up, throttle by wire plugged up. If it is a special or a CVO, we'll plug our blinkers up as well. This being a standard, the blinkers are already plugged up because they're not mounted up here on the handlebars. But we'll get our nacelle put on after we plug everything up. We'll get our trim piece that goes over the top of this shroud, and we'll get our headlight seated back in, and we'll be about done. All right, so we can get the rider's left side plugged up first. Throttle by wire. All right, if this was a Special or CVO, plug these blinkers up. All right, now we're gonna get the rider's right side. I don't know how much you can see from the video, but it'll be pretty cut and dry what you're plugging into. All right, just make sure your headlight wires are still exposed. Now we'll get our nacelle piece on, trim piece on, and then our headlight. All right, so we're ready to put our nacelle piece on. If you've made the upgrade to our crazy clamp, I would go ahead and sit on your bike, get the positioning dialed in to where you want it before you proceed any farther. That way you can lock all your bolts down. You can tighten your set screws so that all that is nice and tight. It's a good secure hold, and then you can proceed. If you've got a stock top riser clamp, what I recommend is tightening the two top bolts, leave the bottom two being the two closest to the rider, leave them snug, and then on your nacelle, there's a piece here that says Road King. All right, it will pop out and give you the ability to tighten up those two bottom bolts. So if you're using the stock top riser clamp, go ahead and tighten the top two up. We can continue putting everything back together, and then you can tighten the bottom two up at the end. If you've upgraded to the crazy clamp, you need to go ahead and get everything dialed in on the feel, and then put everything back together. All right, now we're gonna put our nacelle on. Just make sure when you seat it on here that your hydraulic lines are not in the way. They're not gonna get crimped or smashed. Same thing with your switch harness wires. If this were a stock application, we'd go ahead and put our two bolts in and put that little plastic piece that says lock, unlock. We'd seat it down on there. This guy has a little timepiece feature. I'm gonna set that in, put our bolts through. All right, now we're gonna get this little bolt in. So it's the last bolt for the nacelle. It's kind of a tricky deal. I don't have a great way to do it, but this washer and the nut, you wanna kind of slide it underneath. And then run the bolt through the hole. You can just get it to catch a little bit and you're good. It doesn't need a ton of, tightness on it. It's just to hold it in place. So don't worry about getting a wrench under there. If you can just get your finger on there to hold it enough to get it tightened down, that's all you need to do. All right, we're gonna put the next trim piece on. It just this notch here, or this tab here seats in this notch. There's a rivet that'll go through this tiny hole here. And then you'll put your 5/16 nut on it. This is a cast part, so don't put a ton of force on tightening it as well. You don't want to break that rivet off of this. All right, we're gonna put our headlight housing back in. One thing to notice, these rubber grommets that are around the brass ferrules, just make sure when you're putting these bolts in that you don't put too much pressure on them. Otherwise, they'll push all the way through the housing and you won't have anything to attach the bolt to. So just get them lined up, get a little light pressure, get them started, plug our headlight in. Make sure that harness doesn't get crimped or in a bind. Honestly, a better idea to use a hand screwdriver. But if you feel confident in it, you can use a little small impact, just a little light pressure. Just to make sure that everything's lined up good. Maybe do one on one side, one on another side, one on the top, one on the bottom. Don't just start running them all in on one side. All right, now we're ready to put our headlight bezel trim ring on. Couple of mounting features to point out. On the bezel itself, there's a little wire bent tab. It's going to click in to this tab on the headlight housing, and then you've got a rubber gasket that goes around it. Just make sure it's somewhat seated properly so that it protects, you know, the headlight itself. So just kind of sit that tab in that groove. You may have to twist the bezel a little bit to get the hole to line up. It's a Phillips head bolt. That completes that. All right, now that we've got everything reassembled, the last thing to do is just dial in the feel of the actual handlebars. Now this is our Spearhead, which is fully adjustable. You can rotate it to and from in the riser, and you can also adjust the wrist position. With it being a 3-piece bar, uprights are independent, so you can tweak them in, push them out, you know, however you want, however feels comfortable. It may take a couple of, you know, decent rides to really get the, you know, the feel exactly how you want it. So don't be afraid to play around with it a little bit. You know, that's what you paid. That's what you paid for. But all of the bolts here are 1/4-inch hex drive. The bolts on the side of the base clamp. So once you get it where you want it, tighten them up. We recommend 25 foot-pounds. Honestly, just tighten them up until they feel tight. Don't over tighten them. Check them occasionally. We suggest that you get them checked when you get your oil change service done. So we'll get everything how we want it. Tighten up our base clamp bolts. Tighten up the riser bolts. Get your levers, mirrors how you want them. Switch housings how you want them. Tighten up all those bolts, and then you'll be all set. All right, so tightening up your 2 lower riser bolts, you're going to need a ball end 1/4-inch hex drive. This will allow you to get in there at somewhat of an angle and tighten those up. You can use a non-ball end, you know, just a standard hex drive. It's just a little tougher to get in there. All right, we're going to tighten up our pinch bolts on the base clamp, 1/4-inch drive. I don't recommend using a power tool, you know, an impact to drive these in. Get them tight and then kind of go back and forth a little bit. let's get the other side. Same thing. If you want to use a torque wrench, you can go to 25 foot-pounds. All right, we'll put this little plastic piece, it says Road King, back in place. That covers up where we tightened up our riser bolts. All right, finish tightening up all your brake and clutch lever assembly bolts, your switch housing bolts. You don't have to get crazy tight with them. Just kind of do a hand test, make sure that it's not rotating. All right, same thing on the other side. Kind of do a hand check. All right, so that completes the reassembly of everything. You got your handlebars on, everything remounted, all your trim pieces, headlight. We've also got a couple other accessory items that we sell. We've got phone holders from Vision X. These are perch mounted. They're available on the website, 80 bucks. It's nice, clean product. It's not big and bulky. Also, it doesn't mount to your handlebars. So, you know, the money you just invested in them, you don't have to worry about them being damaged. We've also got cup holders from Zero. Same thing with them. They're perch mounted as well. We don't like to sell anything, you know, that mounts to the handlebar just because of the investment you just made. We don't want to scuff them up or anything like that. They're available on the website. They're 70 bucks. So we went over also our Crazy Clamp, which is our upgraded top riser. Gives you a nice secure hold. Our wire extensions that we used, went over them. They're $35. Brake and clutch is fine at stock length on the 14 to 20 models. That's for a Road King Standard, Road King Special, or CVO. And that's as long as there is a hydraulic clutch. There's a couple of year models in there where a cable clutch was used. I want to say 2016, but don't hold me to that. On the 21 and 22 models, they went to a cable clutch, and if you go up to a 14, you will have to extend that clutch cable, which we sell that extension as well. It's a product made by Fat Baggers. It's a good product, it's easy to install. It's US made as well. But on the 21 and 22 models, you can go up to a 12, and your stock brake and clutch cables will work. So that pretty much wraps that up. All right, guys, I appreciate you hanging out with us today. Once again, we did an install on a 2019 Road King Standard. I went over all the other models that the same rules apply to. If you have any questions, feel free to pick up the phone, give us a call, reach out to us through social media, drop a comment below, or you can go to the Contact Us section of the website, send in an email inquiry, and we'll reply back within a day. Any other questions, just feel free to let us know. Thanks again for coming by and hanging out with us. We'll see you again next time.